TNKR Media.
Welcome to Today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business, presented by FL Montreal. My name is Dan Delmar, along with Mike Newton of FL. Hello, Mike.
Hey, Dan. How are you?
I'm excellent. How are you?
Very good, thank you, especially on today's topic. A lot of fun. We're starting to talk about animals and our pets and everything else. So, yeah, I know there's a serious side to the conversation, but hey, I can't help but start off on a positive note.
I'm really looking forward to the show. I think we mentioned a few times that we are dog people, including on last week's show. And this show is all about the business of animal care. And later in the program, we're going to talk about content marketing for animal rights issues with my colleague, Christopher Paré, who works for us here at TNKR Media. And Chris also works for Humane Society International, doing emergency communications campaigns. He was on the ground in Korea, doing those rescue operations to rescue dogs from the dog meat plants. Chris just has a really profound experience with animal rights content. So we'll talk about that with him later in the show. And our guest is going to be, it's a Quebec classic. We all know Mondou. Mondou is a business that's been around for roughly a century here in Quebec, recently taken over by the Legault family. And not in relation to the premier, at least to my knowledge, but Marc-Antoine Legault, who does content marketing and is part of the family ownership group for Groupe Legault. They own Mondou, and Marc-Antoine will join us on the program today.
Yeah, Marc-Antoine, fourth generation, and one of the interesting components is we're looking at content, which I'm not sure when you go back a few generations whether anybody even used that term.
I know it's when I say I'm a PR and content marketer, people are like, what does that mean? It does require some explanation. We've talked about the term thought leadership on this program and how we don't love it, but it is accurate. You want to be a leader, you want to communicate your values and your knowledge to people on a regular basis. So that's what I do for a living. And when it applies to animal rights, whenever we've done that, it's just so rewarding for me personally. And anyway, we'll get there. We'll get there on the program. Let's start with some news and notes, shall we? And let's begin with pitching. And oh my God, Mike, if there's one thing that I dread the most, it's actual pitching. I prefer if people just find us. What does HBR say about the latest in terms of improving your pitching?
Well, a large part of pitching is a large part of communication at the end of the day. I'm not sure there's a big difference in any of this. It's, sometimes obviously you have to be able to support and you have to be able to bring the content, as we were talking earlier, but a large number of messages get lost in delivery. And, part of this conversation of doing a pitch is not about the slideshow or about the PowerPoint presentation or about the Excel spreadsheet that you put up on the screen when you're pitching, and whether that's in front of two people or in an auditorium pitching an entrepreneurial idea in order to gain financing. It's about the person. It's about the passion, the compassion, the way you deliver. And funny enough, the article makes reference to that the majority of people that buy into, especially in startup and entrepreneurial phases, are more about the passion and the energy and the delivery than they are whether you've done your homework at the end of the day. That what catches them between you and somebody else is going to be the way you bring. And I have to say that this is very, very much our conversations in a day-to-day basis. I mean, some people, their content is phenomenal, but you never really hear it because the delivery is either too dramatic, too overdone, or too sublime and too boring to listen to, so you've lost interest. People need to learn to deliver, and that's whether that's a one-on-one conversation or whether that's in an auditorium.
When I'm pitching and these are mostly marketing services, it's really hard to make sure you communicate the deliverables and the actual tangible stuff the client is getting. So much in terms of marketing is lost in the sea of social media posts and strategy. It's good to be as precise as you can, in my experience.
Yeah, I think it also depends on the size of your audience and what you're trying to get across. So, if I'm coming in to pitch to Dan Delmar, the services and the way I can help him, I need to be listening as much as I need to be talking. If I'm standing up in front of a room full of venture capitalists, I'm not listening. I may be listening to their body language. I may be watching the way they're reacting and feeding off of that. But I have to be able to grab them and get their interest on something that 12 other people might have done before me in the same pitch fest.
I want to get to this topic. We kind of touched on it last week as well when we talked about sort of narcissism at the higher levels. We were referencing the classic Wall Street movie as well. This from Forbes, the 13 worst traits of a manager and their impact on leadership. A lot of them seem like kind of borderline sociopathy issues: arrogance, selfishness, insecurity, lack of humanity and respect. We spoke last week about ego and how it's really important to put your ego aside and become a more empathetic leader.
Yeah, it kind of goes against, to a certain degree, the way the older generation was taught to stand up and be stoic. But I think there's a large difference between being stoic in a leadership role and being arrogant and narcissistic. And ultimately, at the end of the day, one of the most interesting concepts is, if you're trying to win over trust and empathy and understanding of people, is you need to show the human side of who you are in dialogue, in conversation, yet still be able to be stoic and leading the troops into battle. And there's a time and a place for both parts. A large part of the leadership that we see failing, and we can think of heads of countries, no names mentioned, in terms of narcissism, and it's all about me, and I'm not listening to anybody else. Those days are gone, and I really think it's a very difficult time, and you can do significantly more damage, especially in a world right now where we're all battling for talent. I mean, the great resignation, as they're calling it, is certainly making the run and the battle for talent much more challenging. Got to say, if you can't make that connection with your team, and when somebody comes into an interview and the team that's interviewing them can't say, "Hey, leadership gets it," you're going to have a hard time engaging people.
And again, no names mentioned, certainly not in politics, but when you have, in my experience, multiple lapses, prominent lapses in empathy these days, especially when you're managing millennials, you're going to lose them. You're just going to lose them.
Yeah, and I think a large part of that lapse goes from what we consider and explain to be empathy to the inner self, or the narcissistic, being self-centered side of things. I said this last week and I'll say it again. We all need a little bit of that. You can't stand up as a leader and not be a little egomaniac and stand up there and take abuse, if you will, as the organization leader. But I think you also have to be able to understand where things go and where there's a time and a place for everything. And the moment that your ego is in the wrong place at the wrong time, the damage is in many cases irreparable.
And so you like this piece about inspiring your team by sharing more of yourself. Obviously, you have to watch the oversharing problem, which does happen as well among leaders.
Well, yeah, and the overshare is dangerous, but the sharing of yourself, again, it's time and place, right? So the reality of who you are, the reality of the fact that you can make a connection with another individual by being another human being, okay, goes a long way in creating trust and understanding for when you need it at a different point. The good news is both of those, being stoic and a hard-nosed leader, as well as being empathetic and understanding and sharing yourself, are both, the time and the place are both learned. They're both learned behaviors. The problem is you will see a lot of people either not be able to perform the other. So if I'm a big people person, and at the end of the day I'm always going to share about myself. Well, if you can't put the pedal to the metal and stand up there and support your team, it's nice to think you're real, but at the end of the day, how much are people going to follow you? And to the other side, if you never have a human approach, you're never going to be able to be empathetic and gain the trust of other people.
I would also point out that stoicism in the classical sense has nothing to do with eliminating empathy from your persona. It's not.
No.
It's not what that.
No, it really is a large part about knowing a time and a place for all your behaviors. And I think, if you ask somebody the most complicated part of leadership right now, it's that. It's defining when and where and how to be on and how to behave, given so many different variables that are coming at us from a daily basis.
real quick, what is a return to work program and why are they becoming so much more popular in the States?
Well, the return to work, it really at this point is trying to get people back to work. But part of it, I mean, obviously, it comes from the whole the visual and the living of COVID over the last 18 or 19 months. But we're also seeing this as getting people back into the workforce. Now, it just happens to be highlighted right now as we battle for talent that we need to consider taking people who have either spent time raising children or going to school at a later age and being able to bring them back into the workforce into different jobs. And what we're starting to see because of I guess the difference in generational thought on coming back post-COVID, and I guess the importance of working, you're getting a very, very mixed bag of potential employees. You may get a 22-year-old and a 48-year-old whose kids are back in university and are now empty nesters applying for the same job. You have to look at what the commitment's going to be. You have to look at how we're bringing people back. And I think you'll have to look at what that flexibility is going to be in terms of allowing people time to either work different times or with different capacities.
And Mike, very excited to talk about dogs. I love talking about pets, and I know you do as well. And today we're going to talk about a company that's been around for over 100 years in Quebec. It's called Mondou. And we'll talk about marketing pet-related products and the content business as it relates to pets, all that on the program today. So let's welcome in Marc-Antoine Legault. He is part of the ownership group of Mondou, the content manager at Groupe Legault, which owns Mondou, and it's a family business. So Marc-Antoine, welcome to Today's Entrepreneur.
Hi, guys. Nice to be here.
So first question is just the easiest. What do you do for a living? What is Mondou for those that don't know?
Mondou is pet specialty retail store based in Quebec. We've been around since 1938. We're at our 76th store, I think so. It grows a lot in the past few years. We're really specialists in, like I said, retail for pet stuff. Like mostly really specialist stuff. So we don't really sell what you see mostly in grocery stores.
So Legault got involved with Mondou in 1983. I think if from your comments, Mondou itself was set up in 1938 by Joseph Emilien Mondou, but Legault came in 1983. What was the impetus of you guys jumping into this highly successful business that existed for, like I said, somewhere over 50 years?
The funny thing is that my grandfather used to own a business called Gloco, and at that time he sold like grains and semences, seeds for grass, and he had one of his let's say clients that was Mondou at that time, and he knew that Mondou was for sale because it was this huge flour mill in the middle of the Milan. Right now the building doesn't exist, and the building was for sale. My uncle was working for Gloco at that time, and they just saw the opportunity to buy that mill. And they had a corner store on Jean Talon, and they just saw the opportunity to just buy a new business. And at that time, my father was working at Rossignol, the ski company. He was représentant.
Sales rep.
Yeah, exactly. And at that time, my uncle went to see my dad because he was a salesman. So he's like, I need a salesman. My uncle is more of a numbers guy. So the combination of them two just was this great idea, just working in distribution for flour. And they also sold food for deers and some lab at McGill. And through the years, they realized that there was this interest for personification of the animal, and they just took that road and became more of a retail. How can I say? They went to the retail business and they focused more on the pets and not on the science and everything.
But it's an interesting move because, like you mentioned, I mean, the Legault family's been around for 102 years in the business, and you're a fourth generation in the business. it's a big jump to go from being a grain and a seed supplier into retail pet food. One very much dans la région, and the other very much in the hearts and homes of everybody, and whether that's big city or in small towns.
Yeah, but just the fact, I think, I don't want to say they were lucky because they work really hard, but it's just that at some point they focus on the pets. And for some reason, like we saw in the past few years, pets are now part of our family. But at that time, it wasn't like this. And now I'm 30 years old. I've been in the company for 30 years old almost. And I can say that in the past 30 years, things changed a lot, because when I was younger, Mondou wasn't that big and nobody knew about Mondou. Not that much people knew about Mondou, but we grew with the fact that people bought more pets. And we realized that pets were more like, I don't want to say human, but we attach human feelings to those let's say, persons. So, and since since the base of the company was so solid, we were able to grow with the fact that people wanted more. Because how we work, and I don't know if you want to go into that, but how we start the business is that they had the idea that since we were in retail, the idea was to circulate. How can I say it? When it's integrated.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's the right word, but
yep.
They realize that since we're in retail, we have to control our real estate, and after that, we focus on the product. And right now, we're opening our own factory in Drummondville. So the idea was to be so circular that even if the demand grew, we're able to help those persons. So
it's interesting, because for a lot of people, I don't think they necessarily recognize the difference between the pet and, shall we call them, large animal industries that are involved. And I know that from a veterinarian perspective, you generally specialize in pets, or you specialize in large animal, horses, cows on the farm type of thing. And I think in the feed business and the supplies business, there's an equally similar emotional distancing, if you will, from the larger animals en masse to the pet that we keep at home, in terms of what people are willing to pay for pet foods or supplies and everything else. So from a retail perspective, I'm not sure that the large animal component is such a great retail place, but certainly from where you guys are in Mondou, and as we talked off air before, I grew up going to the Mondou in the corner of Chemin Chambly and Cousineau in St. Hubert, and it was always a staple. I mean, I'm 53, did it when I was 12, 15 years old. So it's always been around. It's always been part of Quebec, but it's never really had the presence, I think, that it's had in the last 15 or 20 years.
Oh, exactly. And I think that's part of the work we're doing right now with the fourth generation, which I am in, and it's the focus that our father were pretty humble, and at some point they wanted to stay secretive, and it's all right. That's a good attitude, They just want to focus on their job, and that's it. But now, since we're in this situation where we need more staff, and there's a big problem with that right now, we realize that it's important to talk about our accomplishment and the fact that we have to be proud of what happened in the past, let's say 100 years. So we took that ball, and now we're just trying to, let's say, shout it out loud.
Marc-Antoine, we referred to this in our first segment, but what is going on lately during the pandemic? I mean, have you guys seen an explosion in business due to the explosion in adoptions? Are you seeing a trend?
Yeah, it's crazy. Part of my job right now, we in the past 2 years, we started a group with vets and pet specialists to talk about like the enjeux around animals, and we started to focus about, like, we saw there was an explosion for adoptions, and at the same time we realized there will be more abandons. I don't know if it's the right word, but yeah. And yeah, since the pandemic, let's say business was good. Business is still good, but as my position in a company, I really want to focus on helping people realize that getting a pet is not as easy as buying shoes. So I think that's the position that Mondou wants to take.
Yeah, Mondou is certainly, and Le Groupe Legault have focused on animal welfare, and I think it really has been a large part of the heart and the mission of what Mondou has been doing. The question with the abandoned pets, and you see this in cyclical times. You see it in Easter, but people buying pets, whether it's a rabbit or whatever it is, and then abandoning them somewhere thereafter. I mean, it's a very difficult side of the business that you're doing, and in many cases can be quite topical, right? In terms of what happens in the news. I mean, does Mondou come across these situations, and how do you get that heart, that mission that you want in terms of animal welfare? How do you get that out to the public as one of your key messages?
Our first move, I think we were the first in Quebec to do it. It's to stop selling animals. That was our first move. I think we did it 20 years ago. And since then, people still talk to us about that move. So I know that for a fact that was good. But at that point, we help a lot of we help a lot of foundations like Mira. We're really close to Mira with the Saint-Pierre family. So for us, just that component is really important. But for the past 3 or 4 years, we now doing a thing called Mondou Mondon Refuge. So every May we do this big charity campaign to help refuge around Quebec that needs help, because I don't want to point fingers at, let's say, our system, but let's say the animals, the pets are always the last to get some money from from the government. So we realize as a company that works in that field, we had to help those kind of those kind of groups. So we're really close to some refuge in Trois-Rivières. We work also a lot with some people in Saint-Georges-de-Beauce. We like to find people that share the same, let's say, values as us, and we're trying to help them just to build like a small retail store in their shop. Since we control our real estate, we have the construction team working for us. So sometimes we just help them like paint walls or just change a door. So yeah, we're not a specialist. Like I said, we're a specialist to, let's say, sell pet stuff, like the good stuff, let's say. And we're trying to let people who are specialists in pets do their jobs. And that's what we realize with Refuge, is that they're not seeing our job, and vice versa. So let's help them just do their job well.
The Groupe Legault owns Mondou, and Marc-Antoine Legault, part of a family business, joins us right now, and he takes the lead on marketing content. And so we'll get into that in a little bit as well. But first, Mike, on some of the history, I think it's really interesting how this business, it was a classic Quebec business that had roots, but maybe we weren't quite sure on the direction originally, and then fast forward a few years, we have a pretty sophisticated operation that helps out even affiliated retailers. Marc-Antoine was saying they build stuff for people in order to facilitate better sales. Marc-Antoine, tell me about the acquisition time, bringing Mondou into the family business, and when you guys developed a vision for it.
Oh boy, that's a good question. Let's say it just, like I said, it's been a cycle at some point, and as the business grew, we realized we had to do more. It was just basic, like, let's say, basic science. And at some point, we just started to have new person in our team that had this vision, or were really professional in retail. So they just start to guide us, and we had feelings about what we do, what we shouldn't do. And just if you want to talk about the fact that the acquisition with Rennes we did a few months ago, it just started with the fact that, since we're that big in Quebec, are we able to go in the rest of Canada? And we started to have the discussion about what's our next move for the rest of Canada. And we just start to meet people and create this, let's say, this blueprint of what will be our next move. And as the fourth generation, our move was to say, yeah, we want to do that move. And after that, we had to find the people to help us do that move, if you know what I mean. So that how the vision developed was around the fact that we knew that people were around us to help us do it.
It's very interesting. It's a kind of a, I don't want to say textbook growth case, but I mean, ultimately at the end of the day, that multi-generational business goes from traditionally ideas, gut feel, to a much more structured environment as it goes from generation to generation. And I think you mentioned earlier that in 1983, when your father and your uncle acquired Mondou, it was a little bit of a gut move. It wasn't necessarily strategic. It wasn't necessarily, you were getting into retail, you were getting into things that, you mentioned the word blueprint before. I think it probably wasn't much of a blueprint in, in the early 80s when they put it all together. And now I look, I mean, as you mentioned, you just bought Ren's Pets in Ontario. I know that you have affiliation with Jupiter's Dry Pet Food. I mean, there's a lot of things along here that seem very much strategic. What are the plans for the future? What is the goal look like? National, international? Like, where do you see this going? And how much of that, how much of that is really thought in advance?
I know, let's say, I know for a fact that we have this 5-year plan, and for now, we focus on the plant in Drummondville to make sure it's run properly, and after that is how we're going to manage rents and the way we're going to introduce us to Canada, to the rest of Canada. So as I've through my career, and it's not like a really, really long career, but I tend to realize that if we do long-term plans, most of it won't be realized. So here we focus more, let's say, about like 5 years. And after that, it's called the big, hairy, audacious goal. So we always had this idea of, oh, what if we're international? And what if, it's part of the idea, but let's say we're pretty clear about our next move is what we're going to do in Canada, and afterwards we'll see.
And how do you maintain the humane aspect of what you're doing as you start to go across Canada? I mean, when you're close in Quebec, you can visit refuges, you can do all those things you were talking about before. As you start to grow across the country, it's going to make these areas, I mean, not necessarily more complicated, but certainly a lot more work and hiring a lot more staff.
Yeah, but I think the idea is the fact that we're a family company, being around, like to see people, it's really good for just the family feeling, the fact that people feel that they're part of a mission. And I know as I'm getting older, that part of my job will be to be close to those person. And I like doing that. So it's not a task for me. It's just like, I love to meet people. So I know that for Ren's Pet, probably in the next few months, I will travel a lot to meet people. We did it last week to meet people from our team from Toronto, and just the idea is to make sure that what we say is the same thing as what we do. So as long as we, let's say, ask people how they're doing, and there's not a divergence between our actions, I think we'll be all right.
Well, one of the interesting things is as I look through all of the things you've accomplished and from an awards perspective, or the way things are set up, is you're talking the talk and walking the walk. You're talking to us about dealing with people and the humane aspect of animals. I mean, the last few years, you were 5th on Leger's WOW Index, which is measuring experience. You have 2021, as you had in the previous year, one of the best managed companies awards, and your loyalty program of Cuddle Club, I love the name, Cuddle Club, has created an ambiance as well. So you're not just saying these things. Obviously, with the awards that are being won, and when you consider what they are, somewhere between best managed and a WOW Index, which is best experience, I got to assume that you're pushing the mission and the philosophy to everybody across the organization.
Yeah, exactly. But like, I don't know if I said it earlier, but we're really, really lucky. We have an amazing team here. You know, Mondou or Groupe Legault wouldn't be that big if it weren't, or if it were for the team we have right now. Our general manager, Martin Deschamps, he's really great at just understanding what is the feeling of the family, and after that, just expanded it to the rest of the company. And we're really lucky to have, let's say, Martin. We have just a great group of people that just help us make sure that our vision, the way we see stuff, is accomplished at some point.
So the one thing, Dan, and I'm going to defer to you because this is your area when it comes to content and marketing. It's great, Marc-Antoine, to say you've got all these people, but you got to get the message out. I mean, you got to get the message internally across the board. But, more importantly, you've got to be able to then get that message out in order to accomplish the things that you have. Dan, like I said, I'll let you take this one from here, but, clearly it doesn't just happen on good faith.
Yeah, we'll get into a bit of content marketing next with our expert from TNKR Media. But Marc-Antoine, you guys put a lot of informative blogs on the website. You obviously care about pets. Can you tell me about the strategy there? I mean, you guys want to communicate on a regular basis. Why is content marketing so important to you?
The funny thing, I started my career in cinema. So as I grew older, I was always focused on content. Like I watched so much TV and films and everything. So as I started to work in Mondou, I was trying to took that experience and put it in Mondou. And as I was acquainted with the company, I realized how much we have just, let's say, a gold mine of content, because people at first people like to watch stuff about animals. We all know like how it happens on YouTube, the cats and everything. So how, from that perspective, we can do content that help people learn a bit more about what is to have a pet. And normally, since we're a Quebec company, we focus a bit more in French. Since there's nothing on the web about how to treat well a pet or just how to be a good pet parent, there's nothing on the internet that say it's clear about what we can do as a pet owner. And as I started to do my research, and I just realized that how can we make sure that people buy the right stuff and do the right accomplishment. So since I had this experience in cinema, I realized that how can I mix those two? And for the past 2 years, we just created a team, and now we have a copywriter. And the idea was just to make sure that our clients, because how we build the business was to make sure that clients always have the right stuff. And since now we're on the web, we're on the internet, I realized how can we make sure that the service we have in store is the same as we have online. So it's all about the content. It's all about how to properly be a pet parent.
And speaking of content marketing and animal rights and how to do animal content properly and to make it meaningful, I'm really happy to welcome another one of my experts from TNKR Media. TNKR's content lead is Christopher Paré, and Chris was the former communications director also for Humane Society International Canada, which we'll talk a little bit about today. And we met here at CJD, actually, because Chris was the former producer of the classic Tommy Schnurmacher show here on CJD. Chris, what a great treat to have you back on the air with me.
Hey, Dan, great to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me.
So let's dive right into content marketing, Mike. I think this is the future. I mean, it's not only what I do for a living, but the more useful, the more practical you can be with your content marketing, the better. And what are your views on this first, Mike? I mean, I think everyone should be blogging and podcasting as you guys do on a regular basis. But what are your thoughts? And is it hard to sell that to entrepreneurs to give away a bit of their knowledge on a regular basis?
Yeah. So the issue to me on all of this really is content. There is a lot of stuff out there, for lack of a better term, on the radio in terms of what what people put out. And unfortunately, I think there's a lot of things that go out that people think are content, which are either improperly thought out, I don't know. I don't even want to think, sometimes put up after a few drinks or whatever the case may be. But, ultimately at the end of the day, just because, you can take it down quickly doesn't mean it doesn't have an impact. And I think content is the hardest thing. So dealing with entrepreneurs is a bit of a challenge, especially in a multi-generational environment. Marc-Antoine, one of the things, you're fourth generation. I have to think, going back to your parents when you first started, that, your dad and you said, hey, we want to be online and we want to have this presence, we want to have that presence. The understanding and the content of what goes out there is probably not, understood by the older generation, which, pretty much I'm part of now. So, that side of things to me is huge. It's what message are you getting out? How consistent a message? And most importantly, how respectful is what you are putting out to, whether it's society, whether it's, in this case, we're talking about animals. Is this a loving environment that we're showing? Is this a continuity of behavior that we want to have towards a pet or an animal?
We just have to try a little step every time, because at some point, since the content marketing is so, let's say, young, we don't really know what people really want to see. But the only thing we knew is that what we want to tell them and how we want to tell them. And let's say afterward, how we package it is different. So for us, the important part is to talk about good animal behavior, like good pet parent behavior, and how we connect it to a good product. Let's say I don't want my clients to buy Louis Vuitton shirts for their dogs, because for me that's useless. All I want to know is if he has something on his skin and he doesn't need to go to the vet right now, we do have the stuff to help him. And that's basically how we start our communication, our content. And after that, we're trying to, let's say, surf between trends and tendency, or how it happens. So right now our main focus is how to be, let's say, interesting on TikTok, because TikTok is like this thing where people sing, dance. I'm not on TikTok, so I don't really know everything about TikTok, but how can we let's say educate people, but with a nice twist that just makes them want to watch it. Exactly.
And just to bring in Christopher Paré, so Chris, going beyond sharing cute animal stuff, why is it important to blog in a substantive manner, and how do you do that? How did you do that in the past for animal issues?
Well, I'll tell you, and I really sort of like something really clicked when I was listening to Marc-Antoine sort of give us his overview of content, and that is, in this particular domain, in animal welfare and the retail of pet supplies, there is absolutely no shortage of content. So there's never a moment where you're finding yourself with nothing to blog about or write about. Rather, you're sort of trying to figure out how you're going to parse all of this amazing content and information in a way that makes sense to your followers, to donors, to whoever it is you're really trying to connect with. And I really love Marc-Antoine's focus on education. And I think sort of the vibe that I was kind of getting from that, and this is something I believe in very deeply, is that the animal welfare movement is not going to succeed unless it's a big tent movement. You can't alienate people because they're not vegan. You can't alienate people because they wear leather. Everyone out there, regardless of their connection to animal welfare or animals, has something to contribute. So I think it's very important to really bring it down to the essentials, and educating pet owners and people who live with companion animals is a really great place to start. The other thing I would sort of want to touch on in this conversation is that this is specific to any and all content, especially on social media, but even more specific to animal welfare, is that the kind of content that really moves, that really engages people, is content that is in the now, and that's what apps like TikTok are for. And that's why it is so important to have video of what you're doing, and video of the work you're doing out there. Like, let's say that you're supporting a trap, neuter, release operation, and your goal is to trap, neuter, and release 50 cats in Verdun, then Mondou needs someone there on the ground, like sort of soaking in this experience while doing video, while doing stories for Instagram and Facebook, and really showing people how connected you are, not only to this cause, but, to boots on the ground action, and, blogging ties into all of this, because this is going to be the content that a journalist will be able to hang their hat on, when they're searching for some guest to speak to for a story or a news capsule or something. When they Google trap, neuter, release Verdun, one of the top results is going to be Mondou's blog, and it's going to show just how connected you are to this issue that Montrealers or Quebecers care about.
Quick question. I mean, you must have some rules of don't when you're dealing with people and you're consulting on how they should approach content. Are there some things to just stay away from? Are there certain things that you find just send the complete wrong message?
Well, I mean, again, on a personal level, I'm really not a fan of the blood and guts approach to animal welfare. I mean, sometimes it's very necessary to show people the inside of a factory farm and the horrors that go on there. But the content that sticks with me, the content that makes me want to donate or support, is someone rescuing an animal. I want to see an animal that was emaciated and neglected, now in a shelter with an extra 10 pounds on him, with a basket of new toys sitting in front of him. That brings tears to my eyes, and that conveys results. So, don't make people despair. Do make people care.
Wow, that's awesome, Chris. I really like that. Don't make people despair, make people care. I want to just point out that Chris had a really cool job at Humane Society, but he was also part of, I think, advancing a conversation on something incredibly uncomfortable, which is dog meat. And we're only seeing some results on that front now. Canada recently banning imports, Korea itself questioning whether or not to turn the page on that. Chris, you were on the ground in Korea doing some of these, I guess, the communications part of these rescue operations. You see how the conversation has progressed. Tell me about your approach to contributing to that conversation. Obviously, not just going with the shock approach, but a lot of learning.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I learned a lot about, not only that particular campaign, but the way that I use this word with great reticence, but the way you sell that type of campaign. It's very complex. It's a lot to get your head around. I mean, there's obviously the sort of immediate emotional lightning bolt of the idea of people farming and consuming dogs. And, you can obviously make the argument, well, what makes a dog any different from a cow? And, in some respects, you're right. But in others, this is one of the talking points, is that, cats and dogs are companion animals. And over thousands of years, they've evolved alongside us to be our companions. And therefore, we have an obligation to do everything we can to protect them and ensure their welfare. Now, what makes this such a complex campaign is that it's an international rescue effort. So it raises all sorts of questions. Why aren't South Koreans shutting down these farms and rescuing these animals? Why are these animals coming back to North America? Why aren't you using these funds to help animals here in North America? And the fact of the matter is that, number one, insofar as a cultural tradition, it's important to remind people that dog meat, and this is according to surveys that have been done very recently, is falling very much out of favor with younger generations. This is something that's very much associated with older generations, and it's quickly sort of dwindling down. But essentially, one of the main benefits of something like this, and this is an incredible side effect, is that, with these animals coming over to Canada and going into Canadian and American shelters, what people noticed is that it was bringing more and more and more people into shelters. And sometimes they didn't walk out with a South Korean puppy. Sometimes they walked out with a golden retriever who had been stuck there for 8 months. So we're seeing all sorts of benefits. And really, it's incumbent upon someone, involved with a rescue operation like that or supporting a rescue operation like that, that they communicate these benefits, and why it's important to think globally in terms of animal welfare.
Christopher Paré, content lead at my company, TNKR Media, and he is speaking about his experience as well, past experience with Humane Society International. So Chris, thanks so much. I really appreciate you being on the show today and just having you around.
Thanks. It's a real pleasure. Thanks.
And Mike, as we go to Marc-Antoine for his one piece of advice, clearly, we're talking about a business with a lot of substance behind it.
Yeah, look, we see retail and we think, you see a storefront. You think, you're selling a product trying to capitalize in some form of a capitalist way. I think there's a lot more to what Mondou and Legault Group are trying to do. And it's interesting to see that there is a much stronger social conscience amongst many entrepreneurs today that I think is key in that, whether that is towards humans, whether that's towards the environment, or whether that's towards animals and our pets. It's always great to see people making a difference.
Marc-Antoine, please, your one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur.
I had a meeting, I met Louis Tétu from Coveo 2 years ago, and he told me something that's stuck in my mind since then, is try to, in French is sois bien, puis tu vas être bon. So be well and you'll be good. And it's probably the way I feel for the past few years, just to make sure that if I'm happy, at some point I will be good. And don't be like in the state that I have to perform. If you're in that state, you will not perform.
Interesting. And that's really works for content marketing too, Mike, especially when you're putting so much of your empathy and your love into the content. That shows.
Yeah, and I'm pretty much stuck on the fact that we talked about pets and animals the entire time here today, because there's no doubt, as an animal lover, it touches all of us differently. But I think the way that we look after our pets says an awful lot about who we are as humans.
Let's go around and dedicate this show to our favorite pets. On my end, Poppy Delmar, she's downstairs. Mike, on yours?
Oh, my cuddle pup on the couch and in bed, Ziggy, Italian Greyhound. And Marc-Antoine?
My cat, Ellie. I've had her for like a few months. I don't know how, but I'm so in love with her.
Thanks so much, Marc-Antoine. Really nice meeting you. Thanks to Christopher Paré, my colleague at TNKR Media as well. And Mike, we'll see you back here next week.
You got it. Thanks, Dan.
And next week, we'll be chatting with David Laundrie from Living Safe. They offer a health monitoring system for seniors, so that'll be pretty interesting. And don't forget, you can subscribe to Today's Entrepreneur as a podcast on iHeartRadio, iTunes, or any podcast platform. And head over as well to Today's Entrepreneur for hundreds of local entrepreneur stories over 13 years. We'll see you back here next week. Bye-bye.
This has been a production of TNKR Media. Good talk.